And this week's hot take is the first iteration of Fullmetal Alchemist, the anime, needs to be wiped off the face of the earth.
Ooh.
I'm I'm just gonna go ahead and start. I am not saying that I did not enjoy it. I did enjoy it, but I was 13. But even when I was 13, and as I watched it, it was so glaringly apparent when it went off, when it like got beyond the manga, that I stopped watching it faithfully. And I didn't know why I did it at the time, but I remember like being very, very tuned in for the first half of it. And then the homunculi came in, and I just constantly remember watching or like catching glimpses of the final arc, and nothing made sense. Nothing made sense. And then when you compare it to what they did with Brotherhood, I'm just like, oh, it needs to disappear. Like, no one needs to watch this ever again. Like, period. Now, kudos to all the actors, the voice actors, the team behind it. Like, it's Studio Bones, of course, but then at the same time, it's kind of just like at this time in the early 2000s, a lot of anime weren't doing the we're going to do one season and we're going to let that catch up and then we're going to do another season. They were doing the Bleach and Naruto approach, which was chug out those fucking episodes. Like, get us some filler or get us some kind of content, but this shit is banging and it's making us money. Keep it moving. And I think they should have not kept this moving. I think they probably should have stopped it, let it go on hiatus, or ended it right there like they did with... Didn't they do that with Hunter x Hunter?
Yeah, they did
the
twice.
First anime version?
Yeah.
Yeah. They stopped it because there was no more material, and then they came back and they completely redid it all over again. And that's acceptable, but the retconned ending, like, it just put such a like sour taste in my mouth. I just really don't like it at all. I don't like how the homunculi were represented, or like that whole final battle thing. They really like fucked with the world building and the law, the order, the laws of the world and shit like that. I was like, no, this doesn't make... Okay, the dad, I hated the dad in this iteration by the end of it. While with Brotherhood, I was like, you know what? I can kind of see why that nigga did what he needed to do. So I kind of forgive him. He cool in my book. But with the other one, I was like, no, I don't. I just ended up not liking a lot of the characters by the end of it. And that was my complete opposite feeling when I ended Brotherhood. I was like, I love everything. I love it. I'm not going to rewatch that shit. I think it needs to go.
So by the time you had finished the original series, were you watching it when it was airing, or did you watch it after the fact?
I watched it while it was airing on, like, I think, Adult Swim?
Uh-huh.
And so I wasn't... Oh, you meant, like, in Japan?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was not. I didn't know where to fucking find that shit. I was stuck on Adult Swim and Toonami. Whatever they gave me in the early 2000s is what the fuck I had. And then around, like, 2008, that's when I was like, oh, there are whole websites of just anime, free anime to watch. I'm about to watch this shit.
So the funny part for me is that when I was watching it, I didn't even know that it was an adaptation. For some reason, I just assumed it was an original series. And I remember really enjoying it and noticing that, like, the ending was kind of abrupt and not very satisfying. And it wasn't until many years later when I saw the name of the original creator, and then I was like, oh wait, it was a manga series, and I went to go start reading that and realized actually there, in a lot of ways, not just in the ending, that the adaptation was a little bit different from the manga, at least in terms of how they developed certain characters, especially the homunculi. Even in the period that's covered by the show. So I don't think I ever like had a very strongly negative feeling towards it, only that once I knew that the ending that we got wasn't the air quotes real ending, obviously because it hadn't completed yet, I was disappointed because I felt like there was no way within the context of the original show to get back to whatever the timeline that was being developed in the manga. So, the feeling was, oh, we're not going to ever see the real thing animated.
You didn't think they were going to reanimate that.
Right, I had no idea. Now, number one, it was massively successful. So
Mm-hmm.
that should have been a sign that there was definitely a chance that we would get something new. Number two, and I didn't really know this even after Brotherhood had ran, but that the first movie, the Conqueror of Shambhala, was
Uh-huh.
in the original series timeline as like a resolution to it. So you kind of have to. A lot of people who I think saw
Oh.
the original didn't go back and watch the movie or didn't realize that the movie kind of is the coda to the 50 odd episodes of the original Full Metal Alchemist. And I think when
Yeah,
you
I did
take
not
them
know
together,
that.
the story is a little more cohesive and has a clear resolution. But the characters are definitely different. I don't like sort of the way they tried to resolve. I know Mustang, his arc, having was it Dante get killed by Gluttony. Like there were all these
Mm-hmm.
things that I was like, oh, that's not cool. Like why do they do it that way? And then if you saw Brotherhood, your take was, I mean, would have to be that this. Why would we ever deal with the old one when Brotherhood is so exceptional?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
no, so I
I
definitely
mean,
feel that. But also, I forget that Bones also did the original, so that, it looks pretty good for the time that it was produced.
yeah, like looking back at it, like what it aired from October 2003 to October 2004. And when you look at a lot of shit that was airing back then that time, it's kind of just like, eh. Bones did what they had to do. The show was entertaining. Like, it wasn't that it wasn't good. It wasn't that it wasn't well animated. It was just that that last part at the time was off-putting, and then comparing it to its successor, it's kind of just like, why are you even here? Like, why are you even here? Like, what are you doing? And I mean, I know there are people who prefer that version, which really confuses me. And I think that's probably like rooted in some like nostalgia bullshit. Just like how people in Pokemon hate all the new generations but love the first generation and say that like the new generation's designs are stupid when you literally have a Pokemon that is designed after a Pokeball in the first generation. So like just like that, it's just like, you might want to keep that opinion to your fucking self because I don't really think that's valid. But that's just me.
No, I think that's fair. Yeah, so I see some parallels to, at least in American TV, that there are shows, and certainly there are many long form, non episodic, narratively driven shows in Western TV and American, especially premium cable, that have, uh, I would say, like a similar pattern where, especially when they're an adaptation or there is sort of a visionary creator that is behind it who, for one reason or another, either leaves the project or they run out of source material. And what you get is usually this very jarring line where the narrative threads that are being held together either by the original source material or just in the head of the writer fall away when they're handed over to other folks to finish. I mean, and that is of course the story of Brotherhood. Sorry, of the original Fullmetal Alchemist rather than Brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the U.S. more recently, what we all experienced collectively through Game of Thrones, which is interesting because in my mind in 2007, 2008, the notion of like remaking an anime, I knew that it happened. And there were like shows from the 80s and 90s that got readapted or remade. So I knew that this was a possibility. But I didn't know as much as I do know now about the cost of producing a show. And the thing about anime that may be a little different from Western TV is that anime essentially either just immediately loses money or it pays for itself. So when you have like series that are very popular, like Full Metal Alchemist was, they made so much money that it was very attractive to the studio to come back. Even what was it? Maybe like 7 or 8 years later, less. I don't quite
Uh-huh.
remember. To go and just redo the damn thing because everyone who was already a fan was gonna tune in for the air quotes superior canonical version, and then it would attract a whole bunch of new fans because you already have the machine and the buzz of that series behind it. if you contrast that in the West, like you see that with movies, but you do not necessarily see that with television shows. And the more I think about it, the more I realize, like, as a Game of Thrones reader, somebody who didn't agree with some of the choices in the original adaptation anyway, and then you get to the point where they ran out of books, and the season 6 and about half of season 5, I think most people were not pleased with for a variety of reasons.
Oh, absolutely
Like
not.
the notion that
they were
would
tight.
get remade is still feels like an impossibility on our side of the pond, because we know just how expensive and time consuming and scheduling resources to do a production like the original Game of Thrones is. Whereas remaking an anime, yeah, you have to get a new production committee together, and yeah, you got to get a studio to sign on board. But like, relatively speaking, it's not as hard to do. So, and the profit margin, of course, is huge for established franchises. So, so seeing Brotherhood, I don't necessarily have like the strong negative like emotions around the original Fullmetal Alchemist, but seeing Brotherhood actually just got me excited for anime in general, because it meant to me in my head that other series that I really enjoyed that may have found themselves in the same place that the original FMA did have a chance. So I'm not as negative. I was really more excited as a result, rather than just like, get this thing off the TVs.
Well, I want it off the TVs. So there's a hot take.